So we're going to go to item 6, monthly budget report. Deputy Superintendent Jones. Is Assistant Superintendent Jacobson going to join you on this?
She is, I think.
Absolutely.
She's coming up here. Yeah. So, in the interest of full transparency and visualization by both board members and the public, she has to connect before I, state where we're at fiscally. Oh, is Angie still? Got to just bring it up so we can make sure. Oh, you're good.
We're still making the connection.
We are. Again, my name is Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones, and this is the monthly budget report. I am able to report and certify that the Utah State Board of Education is able to meet all of its obligations and commitments for the known or remainder of the fiscal year. We just did start the fourth quarter of April, starts the fourth quarter of the current fiscal year, state fiscal year 22. I would ask that board members, take some time to look at the different section budgets with any questions or concerns you may raise, because right around the corner, of course, is year-end close. So, we begin the year, then we go through the legislative session, do the mid-year updates, and then sure enough, we're right near year-end close. So the key takeaway is that I see no issues, concerns, or problems with the budget, that we should have a very good year-end close. I am a little bit concerned about carry-forward balances in the sense of the amounts that we may carry forward, but that'll be, we'll report that to you in due time with year-end close. With that, Chair Huntsman, that concludes the monthly budget report, subject to any questions or concerns by board members.
Questions or concerns from board members on monthly budget report? I'm not seeing any, so
Okay.
please continue.
We can go to the discretionary funds report. Later this afternoon, there's some recommendations. You see those highlighted in yellow that will be for your consideration as part of Vice Chair Norton's back brief to the board on the financial, or on the Finance Committee recommendations related to those programs for use of your discretionary funds. Again, I would like to emphasize that we are in the fourth quarter, and we do have close to $1 million, $838,000 of unencumbered, uncommitted. It's a mix between the state funds and the federal mineral lease funds. We have never been in the business of just spending money to spend money. However, with those carry forward balances, without having them committed or encumbered, if you will, those are subject to being swept. At any time, the legislature's been very understanding and very good about knowing and accepting, our plans, our carry forward spend plans. This is just a small part of our overall budget, of course. It is your funding, the board's funding, your discretionary funding. So as we get into that agenda item later today, I respectfully request that you consider those in the interest of due diligence and fiduciary responsibility for funds that are provided to the Utah State Board of Education for public education here at the state level and/or with the LEAs. With that, sir, or Chair Huntsman, that concludes the discretionary funds report. Subject to any questions or concerns from members of the board.
And again, this is informational. Is there any questions or concerns?
Okay, with that, we can go to the next agenda item, which I believe is Sarah for
Okay,
or
we've got
Dr. Young.
both Sarahs coming up, and thank you, Deputy Superintendent Jones. And maybe I should have at least one question for. No, we won't pick on you today.
All right. Yeah, pick on me later, sir.
Okay, I didn't see that. Well, Leah, you're filling in on something, I imagine, or something here? All right, thank you, but who's taking point? Sarah Harwood? Now, board members, it's important that on leadership, we keep bringing this before you. There's a large sum of money that we're accountable for within these LEAs, and a lot of people ask a lot of questions about it, including our legislature. And this briefing is an important briefing, and not only for us, but for a lot of our education stakeholders on this funding. So I appreciate you guys keep coming back. There are little updates along the way, but I think it's significant for transparency and everything else that we're about, because we are stewards of this money. So Sarah Harwood, time is yours. This is informational.
Thank you so much, Chair. Sarah Harwood, CARES Educational Specialist, here to give you our monthly update on the COVID-19 relief funding for K through 12 in the state of Utah. Just as a friendly reminder, COVID relief funding in Utah does refer to multiple awards we've received from both the state and federal levels, which have been made available to our K through 12 local education agencies to address the needs to COVID-19. As we present the updates to you each month, we do so starting at the oldest award, which is our CARES Act, to our newest award, our American Rescue Plan Act. And another friendly reminder, 100% of our K through 12 COVID-19 relief funds are obligated. And then each month we do bring this chart to you to give you a comprehensive overview of each of the awards as with their purpose and their deadline. We do draw your attention to the bottom of the chart where we have distributed over $914 million in direct awards to our LEAs, which is over 1,100 awards. So starting with round one, our Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. This is our ESSER 1 and Gear 1 funds, which must be spent by September 30th of 2022, later this year. Oops. And then as far as where we are at with reimbursements, our ESSER 1 90%, 97.8% of the total award has been reimbursed to the field. For our ESSER 1 10% base, we are at 91% reimbursed, and our Gear 1 at 77%. Then at the bottom of this page, we have the number of LEAs that have requested their full award and been reimbursed. Round two, this is our Coronavirus Relief Response Supplemental Appropriation Act, which is our ESSER 2 and Gear 2 funds, which must be spent by September 30th of 2023. Just some key points. The ESSER 2 was awarded in April of 2021, and over 90% of the total award was distributed to our LEAs. As we look through the LEA plans for ESSER 2, we did note that most LEAs are choosing to spend their funds on addressing accelerated learning for students, purchasing educational technology, and implementing summer learning and supplemental after-school activities. And I do note that ESSER 1 funds must be spent before ESSER 2, which is why when you look at our ESSER 2 reimbursements, they are a little bit lower. As far as our ESSER 2 90% award, we've reimbursed 41% to the field. Our ESSER 2 10% base is at 28%, and our Gear 2, which is a newer award, awarded to the field in November of last year, has reimbursement of 4%. And then again at the bottom, the number of LEAs that have requested reimbursement of their full award. Additional federal awards from the CRISA Act is our Gear 2, our Governor's Emergency Education Relief Funds, which is $11.8 million in awards to our LEAs to serve all students in response to their needs of COVID-19 as approved by the Governor's Office. And then $1.3 million for the University of Utah Reading Clinic, again as directed by the Governor's Office. Then we have the EANS, the Emergency Assistance for Non-Public Schools, where USBE is serving as the fiscal agent for our non-public schools for those equitable services, which are traditionally done by our LEAs with previous federal awards. We are working with 22 schools to provide those equitable services, as well as professional learning and tutoring services allowed by this program. Round three, our American Rescue Plan Act. This is our ARP ESSER and our EANS 2, which must be spent by September 30th of 2024. We received $615 million in total awards with the ARP ESSER, and 90% of that has gone directly to our LEAs. 5% of the total award was set aside in the state reserve to address specifically accelerated learning, 1% for after school, and 1% for summer learning. There was an additional requirement when it came to ARP ESSER that our LEAs spend at least 20% of their total award on accelerated learning to mitigate that learning loss. As we did an analysis of the ARP ESSER LEA plans, we found that on average, our LEAs are spending 36% on accelerated learning, so higher than that federal requirement. Additionally, our LEAs are spending majority of funds on technology for students, capital improvements, and student and community mental health services. And then as far as our reimbursement rate, our ARP ESSER 90%, we've reimbursed $21 million, which is just 4% of the award. Our ARP 10% base, we've reimbursed $46,000. And then we have started to receive reimbursement requests for the ARP summer and after school programs. Additional federal awards from our ARP Act is our ARP EANS or EANS 2, which again, USBE is serving as the fiscal agent for this award. There are 2 additional requirements from EANS 1 or EANS 2 that are different from EANS 1. There is an eligibility requirement that our non-public schools must meet or exceed 24% of total students in the school from households with a low socioeconomic status. And then USBE may not use ARP ESSER or EANS funds to reimburse any non-public school, which is different than the EANS 1 under the CRRSA Act. High-level overview, as far as our ESSER awards in K through 12, 90% of all the funds that we have received have gone directly to our LEAs. 9.5% have been for the State Reserve to further assist LEAs in their needs due to COVID, and then up to 0.5% for State Administration Fund. And then an aggregate overview, again, of our LEA ESSER plan. So for all ESSER awards, this is the number of LEAs that are choosing to spend in each of these allowable use case categories. So the top being educational technology, then addressing pandemic effects on student learning, and then cleaning supplies and services on down. One new highlight this month, as opposed to last month, is our federal reporting survey tool to LEAs. So this is for our ESSER and GEAR funds, where the U.S. Department of Education released reporting requirements for these awards. So we took those reporting requirements and a team of staff translated those requirements into a survey tool to distribute to our LEAs. The questions in the survey tool are pulled directly from this reporting document. In addition to the questions from the reporting requirements, in a previous board meeting, we were directed to reach out to ULEAD to ask if they had any questions, and they did. So there are a few questions from them, as well as a few questions from the Utah legislature. So that makes up the reporting tool that has been released to our LEAs as of March 29th of this year. And LEAs have about 6 weeks to complete that survey and get it back into us by May 10th of 2022. And with that, I'll take any questions before we move on to our action item.
Thank you. That was very quick.
Sorry.
Vice Chair Davis.
Maybe it's
Yeah,
good.
thank you. I appreciate that that we're kind of combining this one with the one for the legislature and ULEAD. I just, we're trying to reduce reporting requirements, and our LEAs have said it's not just reporting, it's all the surveys and the questions. So are all of the questions required of the federal government for this money that are there? Are any superfluous in that section, and are any superfluous with ULEAD and the legislature? Or are those requirements that they have to meet to follow code or rule?
Yeah, Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Okay, so all the questions are pulled directly from the required questions from the U.S. Department of Education. Our LEAs, the questions are broken out into, did you receive ESSER 1 base award? Yes or no. If yes, then you have subsequent questions. If no, you get a skip. So they are required. We want to make sure that we are reducing LEA burden as much as possible. We meticulously went through the reporting tool, noting what questions can we answer with data we already have, and what questions do we absolutely have to ask the LEAs for. So that's what is in the tool, is the questions we absolutely need from the LEAs.
And what about the legislature and the ULEAD questions?
As far as those go, So just because we were recommended by the board to ask ULEAD, there's only 4 questions from the Utah legislature, and I think 3 from ULEAD. So there's not very many, and we chose to combine them in this survey so that only one survey went out to LEAs instead of like multiple surveys, just to try to reduce that burden.
Quick follow-up. So are those required by code to ask, or are they just things those 2 groups want to know? And how long is the total survey? And I won't ask any more questions after that, so others can have a try.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you. So they are not required by the federal government. They are just questions that that the board and the Utah legislature asked to know. So they are not required as far as from the federal government. And then there are 52 questions. So total, if they had to answer every question. But like I said, if they only if they didn't receive a certain award, they don't have to ask the subsequent questions. So it's likely that they won't have to answer all 52.
So there'll be some NAs.
Yep. Yep, there's
Posted
skip
in the-
logic where they get to skip over, like, if it's a no, then they get to skip 3, 4 follow-up, kind of questions.
Okay. Member Lear?
Thank you. Were there any LEAs who did not take any of these federal funds?
Can I respond, Chair?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yes, there are some LEAs who chose to waive the funds. I believe we had 9 for the ARPS, or off the top of my head, who chose to waive those funds.
And, sorry, just
Yeah,
a
follow
quick, did those 9 LEAs not take any of the federal funds with all of those acronyms? Or was it just, were they selective? So is there any LEA who took no federal funds of all of these many opportunities?
Sarah?
Off the top of my head, I do not believe so. I think every LEA took at least one of them, but let me double check on that and get back to you. But off the top of my head, I believe so. But let me double check, and I'll send an email, get back to you with a for sure on that.
Thank you very much.
Member Cannon?
Thank you. So I keep listening to all of this and how much money's spent and how much money's obligated. And I just would really like to have some assurance that we are following up to see that this money has been spent wisely and that this money makes a difference. And the accelerated learning that we're funding is being successful for kids. So speak to me about that. How will we know, and when will you come into us and say, here, they used all of this money and here's what it did for kids?
Definitely.
Follow up?
Yeah. So this reporting tool from the federal government is going to give us a big look into how those funds are being spent and how it's affecting the field. But we and with the conclusion of ESSER 1 coming this year, and so with ARPS, or in the accelerated learning, so that's a newer award. Like I showed, there's only been 4% requested reimbursement, so that one's newer, so we don't quite have data on it yet. I don't think we've picked a specific timeline to come back to you with that data, but we have the federal reporting requirement, which is going to happen annually for the next couple of years. And then, yeah, we're happy to come back with additional. And I think Sarah, Chief of Staff Young, has something to add.
Chief of Staff Young, do you have something to add there? Please.
Thank you. So Chief of Staff Sarah Young, just to add to that, I think one of the important contextual pieces here is that the money is really designed to mitigate what could have been in terms of learning loss. So a lot of the information that we'll be bringing back, you may not see, 5%, 10%, 20% gains in these areas. And again, the funding really wasn't designed from that lens of this is going to, markedly improve. It is trying to mitigate some of those major drops that we've seen in some of our sister states, as well as in some of the original reporting that was presented by Assistant Superintendent Nielsen in October and November of this past year. So we will continue as those assessment scores come out in that kind of late fall timeline to be able to reflect on how is the system going in terms of those statewide data sets and then where do we think, impacts were due to COVID and how the funds were used to ideally mitigate that. But I just wanted to couch expectations in terms of not expecting to see necessarily we've made huge gains as much as we've addressed some of the potential losses with these additional factors.
One of my concerns was just that we have some data to look at, this was the effect of COVID. This is what we did to mitigate the effect, and this is where we are now, so, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We do have one actionable item. Who's going to speak to that?
Dr. Voorhees is.
Dr. Voorhees.
Thank you, Chair.
Potential, it depends on whether somebody
Potential
puts it on the
action.
table. Thank you.
Thank you. Leah Voorhees, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support. I have awesome news for you this morning. So you approved in the December meeting, you approved the use of $900,000 from the ESSER II state set aside to purchase Braille embossers to be able to put in buildings across the state so that teachers would be able to emboss Braille on the fly for students with visual impairments and students who are blind as a result of a huge exponential increase in teacher-created materials because of the pandemic. We sent that request out to RFP, and we were able to fulfill that request that you approved and come in under the approved amount by more than $110,000. So you approved $900,000. We only had to spend $790,000. And as a result of the conversations that we've had with LEAs, with teachers of the visually impaired, with parents across the state, we recognized that Braille embossers are not our only need, are not our only pandemic-related need for students who are blind and visually impaired, that actually we have a great similar need to purchase new braillers, which Board Member Earl has right there to be able to show you what we are talking about. Yes. And we're so grateful that she worked with us on this particular proposal. As a result of this conversation, we identified that the ERC and the USIMAC, the Educational Resource Center, and the Utah State Instructional Materials Access Center, both of which are housed at the Schools for the Deaf and the Blind, have over 300, almost 400 braillers available to students across our state, but that more than half of them, in fact, almost 3/4 of them, are more than 20 years old. So we keep sending them back to be fixed, which is great, but because students needed to have them at their homes during the pandemic and not just at school, we were sending them back, and because of supply chain issues, the students were not being able to access functioning braillers. So our proposal to you today would be to ask that you would approve spending that extra $110,000 to partially upgrade the stock of braillers that we have in the state. And then the ERC, the Educational Resource Center, also has some carry forward funds that they would use. And we would use some IDEA funds, some federal funds that we have to be able to upgrade the entire needed stock, about 200 of our almost 400 braillers, so that students will not only not have to wait to have a brailler fixed, so that we have braillers to be able to exchange in the fixing process, but also so that we can retire. We have some braillers that are 30 years old that we would like to retire. So this is the proposal that we'll bring before you this morning.
Member Earl,
I would like to make a motion
please.
that the board approves the revised Braille embosser, use case for the SR2 state flexible reserve to include braillers to address needs in K-12 education due to COVID-19.
Do we have a second? Everybody seconded.
That'll be 14 seconds.
And would you like to speak to the
I would
motion?
love to speak to it. So I went, because I didn't know all the details of a brailler, I went out to USIMAC to find out about a brailler. They allowed me to check one out. And yes, they have a whole warehouse full of broken ones. And because of the pandemic, interestingly enough, the place they sent them to get repaired has had their own negative impact from COVID where they can take very few. And so it's not a matter of just getting them repaired, it's the place to repair them. Excuse me. So I brought this in as a, you can do it yourself kind of a thing, hands-on over here when you're done during lunch or whatever. It is really fascinating because we think this may look dated, but really this is the personal computer program for students. We do have some online where you can, anyways, there's other technology, but this really is a valuable tool for students to put their information in and get it back. And it's fascinating because where we might have whiteout, they have a little pen thing that they can go back, they fill it, and they're like, oh, I put the wrong letter in. It fills it back in, and then they go back a space and retype the letters. So I had a great, I'm looking at our lunchtime here, but I had a great time there. But I also brought some samples of things that they are doing there that you can look at, so you get an idea of what's going on. The other thing to keep in mind, and I did not realize this, our embossers that we bought are a temporary solution for the needs in the classroom. And which I did know that because of the need, but really right now, they're getting their textbooks ready for the upcoming year. And if we do a major overhaul, this goes to the ethnic studies, of everything, they cannot get the resources to these children that they need in the time limit they need. So we have to be thoughtful when we do any kind of an overhaul of something in a very thoughtful way. It's not just that, it's anything we do because there's a particular process they go through. It's not type it out. They have to go through this process 2 or 3 times, and it takes excessive amounts of time to get it right for the students. And when you come over and look at this map, you'll see what I'm talking about. I'll just hold it up. All right, this is way long explanation. Thank you for humoring me. This is from a Utah, this is a Utah studies map. It literally takes several pages to do that because it takes up so much space. They do the rivers and the mountains on one, they do other things on the other, and then they have to create a guide for it. So it's not just a matter of printing out the information. So it's just something for us to be thoughtful of just as we're doing other things as well. But there you go. You're welcome.
Okay, we have a motion, and it's been seconded. And I'll state the motion, and that is that the board approve the revised brailler embosser use case for the SR2 state flexible reserve to include braillers to address needs in K through 12 education due to COVID-19. I'm not seeing any other discussion on it. So board members at this time, please vote. I don't know why I go to that. It's a habit because I'm thinking I've got to go click something. So all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Voting was unanimous, and thank you for the presentation and the motion. We're excited to put this in.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Board Member Earl, for your help on that.
Okay. Lunch is on. We're going to take a half hour and then try to get back in here and get back to business. So we're going to have a little pause here. Thank you.